When I was in prison, second time, no, tell a lie, third stretch. Yeah, third. There was this screw what really had it in for me, and that geezer was top of my list. 2 years after I got sprung, I sees him in Oliver Park. He's sitting on a bench feeding bloody pigeons. There was no one about. I could have gone up behind him and snapped his fucking neck. Wallop. But I left it. I could have nobbled him, but I didn't. Because what I thought I wanted wasn't what I wanted. What I thought I was thinking about was something else. I didn't give a toss. It didn't matter, see? This Burke on the bench wasn't worth my time. It meant sod all in the end, because you've got to make a choice. When to do something and when to let it go. When it matters and when it don't. Bide your time. That's what prison teaches you, if nothing else. Bide your time and everything becomes clear, and you can act accordingly.
Welcome to 1999, the podcast. I'm John Brooks.
And I'm Julia Sermons.
And today we are discussing the 170th highest-grossing movie of 1999, finishing just one spot ahead of cult favorite Jawbreaker, released October the 8th in just 17 theaters and going on to make $3.2 million on a $10 million budget, though it should be said that its widest release was it playing in just 105 theaters. Directed by Steven Soderbergh, just on the verge of his major commercial successes, Erin Brokovich and Traffic, both released on opposite ends of the year 2000. Written by Lem Dobbs in the middle of a pretty terrific 3-film run, which also included 1998's Dark City and 2001's The Score. It's the third and final film in the legendary 1999 Terrence Stamp trilogy, which included, of course, Bowfinger and The Phantom Menace. Starring Terrence Stamp, the late Peter Fonda, a terrific Louise Guzman, Leslie Ann Warren, Barry Newman, who also appeared in Bowfinger, by the way, Bill Duke, who also appeared in 1999's Payback, a movie we talked about pretty recently, and more on that later, Amelia Hindley, and the very late character actor Nicky Katt, who died just a few weeks ago. Today, we are talking about the Limey.
So?
You're English.
Yeah, that's right. Got called out to LA unexpected, like. Do a job of work.
No rest for the wicked.
Yeah. You wrote me about my daughter.
Jenny was driving a little too fast, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Could have happened to anybody.
No, not my girl. Who done it then?
Huh?
Snuffed her.
What are you talking about?
This bloke she was bunked up with.
Terry Valentine.
Your daughter, she had a fondness for dangerous men.
Hey, can I help you?
Terry Valentine, do you know him?
Who are you?
Hey, can I ask you a question? You have any friends, man?
The car behind us has been following us.
What is going on?
Jenny never told you about her dad. He's a career criminal. Well, what do you want me to do?
Handle this.
What's the deal? You and Terry Valentine at 20 paces?
Don't see why not.
You're not from around here, are you?
Tell me about Jenny.
So, Julia, what's the Limey about?
Career criminal Wilson, played by Terrence Stamp, regrets his relationship with his daughter Jennifer. He was incarcerated for most of her childhood, and she loved him dearly but was constantly disappointed that he wasn't around. While Wilson is serving his latest stretch, Jennifer dies in a suspicious car accident. Once he's released, Wilson heads to LA to find out the truth about her death. And even though practically nobody can understand his Cockney rhyming slang, he still makes good progress towards this goal. Jennifer's friend Eduardo, played by Luis Guzman, tells Wilson that Jennifer had discovered that her rich boyfriend was involved in a shady deal. Wilson learns that the boyfriend is music producer Terry Valentine, played by Peter Fonda. In his pursuit of Valentine, Wilson ends up killing one of Valentine's security guards. So Valentine's enforcer hires a hitman, a young edgelord named Stacy, to kill Wilson. Stacy almost manages to do this, but is intercepted by DEA agents. The narcs are chasing down the drug dealers who used Valentine to launder their money. One agent makes it clear that he doesn't care about whatever Wilson wants to do to Valentine. He gives Wilson the address of Valentine's beach house where Valentine is hiding out. Wilson follows Valentine. Meanwhile, edgelord hitman Stacy mistakenly believes that the agents who stopped him from killing Wilson are actually gangsters. He assumes there's a big score going down and wants to rip everybody off. So he also heads out in search of Valentine. This leads to a massive shootout where basically everybody gets killed. Wilson finally finds Valentine, and Valentine tells him the truth about Jennifer's death. Jennifer threatened to turn him in for the money laundering, and he killed her in a fit of anger. But Wilson decides to let Valentine live, and he returns to London.
The Limey was very well received by critics with a 92 rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a Metacritic of 73. That includes 4 reviews registered as 100s by Metacritic, including San Francisco Chronicle's Edward Guthman, Portland, Oregon's Sean Levy, the Portland Oregonians, I should say, Sean Levy, San Francisco Examiner's Wesley Morris, and Entertainment Weekly's Lisa Schwartzbaum, who wrote, quote, like Pablo Picasso, thrillingly exploding old notions of how we perceive faces and wine bottles, director Steven Soderbergh thrillingly splinters time and action in The Limey, a small cubist masterpiece about crime and punishment set in the most split level of environments, Los Angeles. With a compact, efficient plot, stranger comes to town to avenge, stranger avenges, stranger leaves town, a dazzling diamond-cut script by Lem Dobbs, who also wrote the screenplay for the director's Kafka, and a great jazz combo of a supporting cast. Soderbergh extends the shape-shifting that distinguished Out of Sight, skipping and backtracking, repeating scenes, and restaging them. More measured praise came from the likes of Roger Ebert, Peter Travers, and the New York Times' Janet Maslin, who wrote, quote, the flinty modernism that looks so bold on screen in John Borman's 1967 nouveau noir classic Point Blank has become innocently nostalgic in Steven Soderbergh's hands. The Limey, which could be called the latest directorial oddity from Soderbergh, if that were not such a redundancy, is a piquant throwback to that style. And among Soderbergh's widely varied films, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Kafka, The Underneath, Schizopolis, and Out of Sight, this one actually has the best chance of becoming anyone's sentimental favorite. There are no outright scathing reviews of The Limey, but the weakest might be from Times' Richard Corliss, who wrote, quote, nothing much, nothing new here, unless you care to study how the fingernails of time have raked across Terrence Stamp's still handsome face, or see Peter Fonda playing the cool drug lord his Easy Rider character might have become. As he did in Out of Sight, Soderbergh slices, dices, and Cuisinarts the script into flashbacks, scene shifts, stop motion, and other distracting foolery. He is working out of a new form of visual storytelling. Is he working out the new form of visual storytelling, or has the ever so promising director of Sex, Lies, and Videotape lost his chops and his marbles? So that's some critics' thoughts. We're going to talk about our own. Julia, who is joining us today?
Today we have Devan Scott. Devan is a man of many accomplishments, but I know him as the creator of the wonderful Essential podcast, How Would Lubitsch Do It?, which is a comprehensive look at the life and career of one of my very favorite directors, Ernst Lubitsch. I was so proud to play a small part in it, and I'm so glad it exists in the world. But Devan, do you want to talk about that and what else you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure. I would say I'm a hobbyist podcaster in the sense that I do podcasts in my spare time between mostly doing film post-production and occasionally shooting movies. And so this is and so, half the time I'm in this room here, this neutral 18% gray room, working on movies, making them look a certain way. And the other half the time I pull up the mic and talk about movies and teach them too. I teach a couple of I'm an adjunct professor, I think is the word, in my
Oh yeah,
second
where
life.
the money is. Adjunct professors.
Yeah.
Yep.
Adjunct professing. That's where getting rich real quick over here. But yeah, no. I talk about movies a lot. I talk about imaging science a lot, and I also make movies. So I kind of I do a bit of everything in terms of the digital imaging formation pipeline. That really rolls off the tongue.
So this is one we've been sitting on the Limey for a while. This is one that a lot of people have brought up with us and like mentioned in passing or sort of listed among their favorite movies of '99. It's one that having rewatched it, I kind of think I didn't really remember it right the first time. I remember seeing it shortly after it came out, being a fan, but I was talking to Julia about this after our last recording. We were talking a little bit about Soderbergh and this sort of era of Soderbergh. And it occurred to me that I think a lot of this movie got mixed up in this sort of like moment in Soderbergh's career where I think he really kind of broke out and sort of found his kind of voice. I mean, he had a string of enormously successful, both commercially and critically, movies starting here. And so I think I've sort of rewritten a lot of this movie with a little bits of like Out of Sight and Traffic, maybe Erin Brokovich, I don't know, sort of looped in. But I understand that like you're something of a Soderbergh aficionado.
Yeah. Can you tell us like why you're a fan of Soderbergh? What is it that you like, and what of what you like is in this movie?
Yeah, so Soderbergh, also known as Peter Andrews, also known as Mary Ann Bernard. He is, if there's a filmmaker working today who is my kind of platonic ideal for if I was more prolific and more talented, who would I want to be? It would be Soderbergh, because Soderbergh. I was going through my list. I keep a list of his movies on Letterboxd to stay sane, and I've seen 28 of them, and I ranked them, and I realized he's only made a couple of movies I would say these are unambiguously like great, and maybe one masterpiece, and that's Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which is his first movie he made at the age of 26, which is very unfair. And yet he's one of my favorite working directors. Why is that? Well, Soderbergh doesn't really seem to care if every single one of his films is a great, perfect object. In fact, I think he's almost allergic to perfect objects. He amuses himself. He might be my favorite example of a director who got bored with making movies the regular way and has essentially resorted to what I started calling kink in the artistic sense, in that he has spiced up his filmmaking life by essentially doing really, really weird stuff and putting weird restrictions on himself. And The Limey is a great example of that, right? Like, I mean, the editing in this movie we'll talk about, but it's wild. And just his willingness to experiment in ways that have no chance of working out, I find deeply inspiring. He's incredibly exciting, and you can look at any point in his career, and there's something I have tried to take inspiration from, even in terms of just workflow and philosophy. So, he's just, I'm so glad he makes like 20 movies a year, because it is endlessly exciting. And I think the film world is so much richer for having him around, even when I saw Presence recently. I think it's one of his worst movies. Yeah. I don't think it's very good. I'm so glad it exists. I just love that he took that swing. It's great.
Yeah,
so that's why I love him.
We talked about Woody Allen a couple episodes ago. We did Sweet and Lowdown, and the what's the word I'm looking for? Not proficiency, prolific nature of Soderbergh and Allen are pretty similar. The sort of scope of movies that they're making, though, is quite different. I mean, I think Soderbergh, even in his like small movies, is kind of thinking big, which I think is really kind of interesting. And it's really astonishing. I mean, he does not make 20 movies a year, but it is astonishing that this Erin Brokovich and Traffic came out within 14 months. Like, that's fucking nuts, right? Like, and I know he didn't like film them all within 14 months, but it's still just astonishing that like these three great movies all sort of go one in such succession. You don't really see that these days really with anybody, I don't think. But You know, it might have been a coincidence sort of the studios deciding when to release movies, but it's still just it's kind of jaw dropping to think of those three movies in that quick succession. Julia, what's your history with the Limey?
This was actually the first time I saw the Limey. I think I thought I had seen it, and then I started watching it, and I was like, "Oh no!" And like that was actually kind of a delightful surprise because it is kind of it does take you on a little bit of a ride. So to see it for the first time, I think made it really fun. Although this is actually something I've enjoyed. I think this is the one I've most enjoyed that we've done in a while.
Oh yeah, me too, for sure.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Devin, please.
It's my according to my list, which is not reliable, it's my 7th favorite Soderbergh film, which means I like it a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's a film. It's interesting. I think there's an inverse relationship between how, on Soderbergh being on good behavior and how much I feel close to his movies.
Yeah.
Like I love Ocean's 12. I deeply love Ocean's 12. It's my favorite Ocean's movie. It's one of my favorite movies of the last 25 years. And it's him trolling you for 2 straight hours. And so the Limey is like, it's right in the middle, right? He's not on great behavior. I want to talk about the commentary between him and Lem Dobbs because that is remarkable. Lem Dobbs, you mentioned that, this film got some negative reviews. I'm convinced this film's harshest critic is its own writer. It's very interesting what Soderbergh did and how much Lem clearly resents it. But we can talk about that eventually. It's an interesting case. So he's ruffling some feathers here, Soderbergh is.
Could you say more about the editing and like what you think is interesting about it? Because it felt like the kind of elliptical flashbacks and the kind of hypothetical scenes and stuff. It felt very Nouvelle Vague to me in a lot of ways. And I guess we should shout out Sarah Flack, who was the editor. But can you tell me what's interesting about it to you? Or, I mean, is it interesting? I don't know.
Well, I think it starts with Sarah Flack. I mean, this was back in the years when Soderbergh still worked with like all-time great editors. And I think Sarah Flack is a master editor. I mean, she did Marie Antoinette, which is one of my favorite edited movies ever. She's worked with Sofia Coppola a whole lot, which says, and which is one of, I think, the greatest directors of editors in the modern America. But so this film feels like a natural progression of stuff like Anne Coates's famous non-linear undressing and love scene in Out of Sight, the one that she edited there, which she edited the whole film, but that's the scene that people point to. And this is a whole film of that, right? This is a whole film that takes place on an airplane in a moment of reflection for Terrence Stamp. So we are seeing inside his character's memories throughout the whole film. That's what that was kind of Soderbergh's big idea for. I mean, that is not, I believe, in the Dobbs script. A fact that Dobbs does not like. But so essentially the film was written to be linear, but then Soderbergh just at the shooting script stage just hashed it all up, mixed up shots, deliberately shot scenes such that they would lend themselves to this, cut out whole parts of it, and pitched the whole thing as a kind of a reverie of this character, right? And part of what I think is so brilliant and impressive about this movie is that it does that without ever being incoherent. I'm never wondering, wait, who, wait, where, what? It's weirdly intuitive, and I put a lot of that on the collaboration between Flack and Soderbergh. Clearly, this is a director and an editor who are communicating very, very well. And it says a lot. I mean, this is in between two films he worked with Anne Coates on, and this might best them, and that says a lot because Anne Coates is one of the most legendary editors ever. She edited a small independent film called Lawrence of Arabia, and so that's a lot to live up to. But I think this might be my favorite edited Soderbergh film ever.
Yeah, like to me, I agree. To me, it felt very something I would love to talk about is they're kind of like two registers here, which is kind of like the fun gangster film, and then like maybe it's the framing device, like the way you're saying it, Devin, of like this more elegiac and wistful film. And I think like I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like the editing is kind of can be used for both those things, but is also kind of about putting them together.
Yeah, the film is so odd tonally, isn't it? Right? Because you have, to me, when I watched the film, I watched it twice in prep for this, and the thing that struck me on both occasions was that I come away from the film feeling profoundly melancholic. And this is a film, where at one point Terrence Stamp goes into a warehouse off screen. There's tons of gunshots, and he comes out and like bug-eyed. I find this moment hilarious where he goes, fucking coming.
Yeah.
There's that moment, and that doesn't feel like it should be in the same film that has like his that has those extremely, and then the intertextual flashbacks to the Ken Loach film I find kind of weirdly touching, and the story with his we should talk about that, the fact that this film uses a Ken Loach film.
Yeah, it does.
And this, even the story with Peter Fonda, there's a melancholy and a thoughtfulness to his character, and when his character dies, I feel bad. It's not a satisfying revenge, and so all these elements kind of combine, and I think the editing does. You're totally right, Julia. The editing unifies all that, and how it does it, I frankly am not smart enough to understand why, but it intuitively works. It just intuitively works.
Well, that's something I think of with Soderbergh. Like, so I'm a big crime film fan, and I love heist movies. So, like, that's the part of the Soderbergh canon that I'm most familiar with. But I feel like, and I felt, even though I also felt extremely sad when I watched this, I still had this feeling that I often have when I'm watching those Soderbergh movies, which is just like, man, what a goddamn delight that was.
Yeah.
And like, really feeling like there's a magic to it, and feeling like, how does he pull it off?
Yeah, there's a lot of like meta and artifice in this movie that I think is intentional. Like, as I thought about it more, it's one of those things when as I was watching it, I was like, I didn't pick up any of this when I watched it, 25 years ago for the first time. And the only thing I really remembered about it was like Terrence Stamp kind of like stalking around, and like his daughter. And that's pretty much like it's all, as one character says, a vibe, which I did not know was a phrase in 1999, by the way. I was shocked to hear a character say it's a vibe in 1999. But what I think is really kind of interesting is like the artifice of it is actually like put to really good effect, because one of the things I was always kind of not clear about, or seemed a little off, was I never really quite bought that the kind of Cockney sort of working class guy that Terrence Stamp is pretending to be is authentic. The way he keeps throwing in all of these like Cockney phrases, it feels very forced, and it feels almost as though like the character that he is kind of remembering on the plane going through all of this drama is kind of an invented character, kind of in his own head. Like, it's almost as though Terrence Stamp is playing a character, right? And there's something about like that, and then the Peter Fonda making like Easy Rider references, and the fact that like George Clooney shows up as like a celebrity in this, and it's right after Out of Sight. There's all this sort of like weird kind of like taking you, like breaking the fourth wall and kind of taking you out of it, elements of it that I think are like cute and clever, but like in any other movie would also be sort of eye-rolly, but it works so well here because it's also like weirdly contrived and sort of artsy in the way that it's constructed.
Soderbergh goes beyond stunt casting into a fully formed, I think, experimental framework of casting.
Right.
This isn't quite like this isn't quite like The Girlfriend Experience, where he deliberately casts non-actors and the non-performances they give are key to the movie working.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like something like Haywire, where
which I think Dobbs also wrote, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask about similarities if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, and Haywire does feel. I just recently rewatched Haywire. I've been on a bit of a Soderbergh binge, so this is actually a very well timed episode.
Yeah,
and Haywire is also a film that takes place up until about the 2/3 mark in a slightly more conventional flashback structure than this, where most of Haywire is Gina Carano narrating or describing the plot at that point to some hapless guy she's happened to run into and is stealing his car, right? And so, but there's even points in that where even structurally she makes fun of the script by like saying, are you keeping up with these 10 name figures? But long story short, in terms of the performances, I think Soderbergh often uses actors in a way that like basically works with their baggage in a metatextual format. Like in this case, Terrence Stamp, especially, given what, the people in the audience who he favors at least would know about his past acting and the roles he's played. But I don't think he's called upon to give like a naturalistic performance in the same way Carano isn't,
Right.
like Carano and Haywire.
Yeah.
She's not a good actor, but she has a very particular set of skills that are what the film needs, and she is good as that character. And I think with Stamp, I don't think he's giving a good performance in the usual thing we usually value in our society of like Lee Strasberg type stuff. But he's giving a great performance in terms of this kind of arch, slightly like distancing thing that the movie really, really needs to work.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, completely agree.
Do you have feelings about the like relationship between the arch distancing thing and the way I think we are sincerely supposed to feel about Jennifer's death and the toll it takes on Wilson?
It's an interesting thing, right? Because Soderbergh is often able, at his best, I think, to turn distancing, like his relationship with what constitutes distancing is different than most filmmakers, right? Usually we think of distancing as like, how Brecht are you? Right? How removed are you from from feeling the emotions within the story? But Soderbergh kind of finds other ways to do that. And I think that's where his formalism comes in, where his structural experimentation, where to me, it's okay, I'm going to let myself have fun, be distancing with the performers, but we're going to let you key into the emotions through just sheer montage, music, sound design, color, even like the color design by Ed Lachman in this film is really, really emotive to me.
Yeah.
Like his use of green, of blue, of yellow, especially in the really good 4K restoration, which really restores a lot of that. It makes me feel things. And I think the sum total of having this incredible level of formal control and expressiveness, it's not that it makes up for the distancing of the performances, it's that that's the language of connection that Soderbergh prizes, is a formal one. Although I'm drawing like a dichotomy between like acting as form, which it is, but more of like a directorial form of like sound and visual. He loves keying in audiences with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it struck me like the performance as a performance sort of that's like of a performance is effective in that like one of the themes of the movie is that, he is trying to kind of grapple with his past failings and mistakes, and that this sort of character that I think he is sort of playing within the movie, right, like is itself a sort of coping mechanism for the failures of his daughter. And then like when he sort of realizes at the end with Peter Fonda that what killed her was the very same thing that like drove them apart in the first place, and that's the first time that you really get a sense of like real emotion and humanity from him, as like the actual version of him kind of comes out. Like it's not a naturalistic performance as Devan said, but like that does not a good performance make, right? It's sort of part of what makes the performance so interesting and such a tour de force, is that there is this like very clear mask that he's put on, right, of this sort of like working class Cockney guy, this sort of thug, right? And then I think it's also like an incredibly interesting choice in terms of the sort of meta commentary and sort of the artifice that his flashbacks are like from a different movie. And when when it first came on, I'd forgotten that they used that, right? That's not one of the many things I'd forgotten about this movie. And I was like, oh, did they de-age him? And I was like, oh wait, that's not a thing 25 years ago. You can't de-age people 25 years ago. That's Ken Loach's first movie. I didn't know this. So Poor Cow, which is that is Ken Loach's first ever movie. Guy's still making movies. He's like 90 something years old, right? Really interesting sort of. I've never quite seen that approach before. I don't think of any other movie where a different movie is used as flashbacks in that movie. But I think it sort of speaks to the way that everything that you're kind of seeing here, right, is itself a fantasy in some way, right? It's not, it's somehow like not all quite real. And I also think that that's part of like why nobody can understand what he's saying, because he feels misunderstood. Like when Leslie Ann Warren's character says to like, I think it's Louis Guzman, is like, do you ever understand what he's talking about? And she's like, no, but I like, do you understand what he's saying? She's like, no, but I know what he means. Right. And I was like, oh, okay. I think that's kind of the thesis, right? Right there is that like, no one quite understands his words, but they understand like his motivations.
Something I thought, like, as I was watching the film for the first time, and like I'm just a little bit thick, but I wasn't understanding, like, are the shots on the plane flash backs or flash forwards? And like I really this is just all close-ups, and I really came to appreciate the acting he did in those scenes in terms of like showing a bit of emotion and showing a bit of softness, but not too much. And I don't know, that part of the performance really ended up speaking to me.
So I want to talk about the comedy as well, because like there's parts of this movie that I think are laugh out loud funny. So I'm a very big fan of Louis Guzman. Obviously Soderbergh loves him. And this is I think this is my favorite performance of Louis Guzman, who like really does kind of steal this movie in some meaningful ways. The two parts of this movie that sort of make me laugh out loud are when they're in the party and Terrence Stamp says, I'm going to go have a butcher's around the house. And he's like, who are you going to butcher? And then the other, like, I think just great moment where you kind of realize what sort of movie this is, where the sort of tension of what precedes it is really kind of cut with this really great line where we're introduced to Louis Guzman's character as kind of this like mysterious, possibly, possible hitman, possible drug dealer. We're not really quite sure. And then we find out the reason why he knows his daughter, and it's because they're in the same acting class. And he's like, oh, she was in my acting class. And I was like, that's great. This is a great way to like weave in all of the Los Angeles-ness of what we're doing here into one story. And it should have been like absurd and eye-rolly, but it just sort of lands so beautifully in this movie. But like across the board, I don't think there's a really weak performance anywhere in here that any like took me out of it at all, even though they're very different performances like across the board too.
As far as comic relief goes, for me, the moment that it comes out of nowhere and it just kills me is the scene where Terrence Stamp just casually throws the guy off the ledge. In the background, especially coming after like a near miss of a scene that's really tense where he almost tries to kill Peter Fonda, and then goes, and it's this big emotional moment where Louis Guzman talks him down, and then a minute later he's just like, whoop. Casually killing a guy. I still don't understand how that works. It feels like one of the moments when we're supposed to take it as like he was in a real state and this is him remembering it, maybe not accurately. But in the moment, it's just so surreal. I feel like it almost feels like David Lynch staging, where it's just so casual. It's like, well, he's dead.
Yeah.
It's great.
And then like later, Peter Fonda's character just finds this totally plausible way to cover it up, which I found hilarious.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just like, oh yeah. And then he was like, who's going to stop a guy who's 400 pounds? And then his henchman is like, well, he's a little more than that.
I think that's one great thing about Soderbergh. He, this is something, Devin, you were kind of talking about before with the girlfriend experience and Haywire, that he is willing to work with actors who may not have like the actor's pedigree, right? But are exactly right for the role. I'm thinking of like I can't remember now, I'm blanking on her name, but the one who plays his new girlfriend, Peter Fonda's new girlfriend.
On my last viewing with friends, which is a few weeks ago, all four of us independently misidentified her as Denise Richards.
Well, yes, she is.
Me too.
She is. We have Denise Richards at home, but she has been on a soap opera, One Life to Live, one of those for like a lot, like years and years and years and years. Like a very famous soap actress, right? She was on another soap opera before that. I think she's great. She's like absolutely perfectly cast in that role. She's like exactly the right mix of kind of like, sexy but clueless at the same time, and like it totally is the kind of role that Denise Richards would have played at that time as well. But yeah, I mean that's the sort of actor that Soderbergh just gets a great really solid performance out of, and there's no sort of you could have casted sort of any kind of it girl of the moment of the 90s in that role, but like he's just very good at finding people who are just like exactly right for what they are, what they're doing, right, all the way through. Like, and you know, this one scene, one of my other favorite sort of lines is Bill Nunn in that monologue that he has, and the line that he says to Terrence Stamp was like, "There's just one thing I don't understand. Every word you just said." And like the deadpan delivery of it, it's just priceless. And like he's like not even credited, right, as like it's an uncredited performance, and it's fucking great. But yeah, that's Soderbergh is a really, really great director of actors, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that.
He's directed a lot of actors that I don't usually love to their best performances, like Andy
Jennifer
McDowell.
Lopez.
Yes, exactly. And Andy McDowell, I think, is the greatest example of that, where I think she's a fine actress, but her work in Sex, Lies, and Videotape is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I think it implies a career that never really happened for me, where I watched her and I was like, have I missed her filmography? And no, I haven't. I've seen most of her work actually. And she's just never been she's just never gone that far. She's never been pushed that far by anyone into those surreal emotional areas that she gets into in that movie. It's a very weird movie. And same with Channing Tatum, right? I mean, Channing Tatum had this reputation as like a hunk of meat, because he kind of is. And then he's in Magic Mike and Haywire, he actually is a hunk of meat. But in Magic Mike and, you know, various other Soderberghs, he truly gives, I think, very accomplished performances. And that's where I realized he was a legitimately good actor, but only because I think Soderbergh opened me up to the mechanics of what makes him work.
Well, this is almost impossible to remember now, but like people forget, like Julia Roberts pre-Erin Brokovich was not really taken seriously as like, you know, an Academy Award winning actor. Like that was a turning point moment in her career, and like he was the one who believed in her as a great actor. Topher Grace in Traffic, another one, like an incredible performance, and you know, he's that kid from that 70s show at that point, and it's playing very much against type and a really like remarkable performance. But yeah, across the board, everyone here is fantastic.
You know, and yet he got Julia Roberts to top herself, playing Julia Roberts,
right?
And you know, the rest was history. The most beloved scene in movie history, maybe the greatest achievement in human history.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I'm curious. So, I mean, Julia, we sort of like we banded this about last time, but I want to get your take as well. So, you say this is your 7th favorite according to, I guess, Letterboxd. What are your 6 above this?
Let's see. According to Letterboxd, and my Letterboxd list, I'm a very impulsive person, and so I change things a lot. So here's my current top. Let's go top 10 from number 10.
Yeah.
Erin Brokovich, 9 Contagion, 8 Haywire, 7 Limey, 6 Side Effects, 5 The Girlfriend Experience, 4 Ocean's 11, 3 Out of Sight, 2 Ocean's 12, 1 is Sex, Lies, and Videotapes.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's good. Yeah,
hot takes in there. There's some very hot takes in there.
I don't think they're very hot takes. I mean, like, I guess like Side Effects is one that, again, Julia,
I love Side Effects.
Yeah, we talked about that off mic last week. Is Side Effects your favorite, Julia?
I actually have a really hard time picking one, to be honest. Like, I find Soderbergh just so delightful, and I'm always, like I said, I tend toward the crime and the heist, and I'm like, basically always happy to spend time with him. And like, so like, I just saw Black Bag, and like, now is that my favorite? I don't know, maybe, you know, like, like I said, he really, like, it's funny because he is this kind of formalist, and like, I like that about him. I like that he like is really interested in style and stuff, but he just like hits me, like he hits my pleasure centers also in a way, like I said, like where I'm just like usually delighted to be in his company.
What do you think of his trollishness? Because like my thing about Soderbergh is that I am at heart, I've been an internet troll since I was 10, hopefully for the forces of good. And he to me is one of the great trolls in cinema. He just constantly does stuff to me that is provocative. Like, I mean, I think of Ocean's 12 and the way that film denies you what you want. I think of something like even the Limey and the way this film denies you certain satisfactions that the structure usually gives you.
Yeah.
But that is, I think, the thing that prevents him from maybe being this like endearing mainstream figure, is that he is willing to deny you as the audience what you want.
I don't know. I guess it makes me. This is going to sound like he's giving me vegetables or something, but like, I feel like usually when that happens, I'm like, oh right, I didn't actually want that. I wanted something else, and you gave me that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm okay going on that journey. And maybe I just like being trolled. I don't know, but like, I like zigging and zagging in filmmaking generally, and I feel like he's maybe like the master of that.
Yeah, I think the reason why it works is because the trolling never feels arbitrary. So, like, if we're going to take the Limey as an example, right? It's kind of set up as this neo-noir revenge fantasy. But then by the time it kind of reaches its sort of climax, you realize that, like, that's not really what it is. It's a story about a guy coming to terms with his own like failure and trauma, right? And then the ending it delivers to you, while it feels very, in a way, anticlimactic and you might say trollish, Devin, because like it's clearly this is how these movies have to end, right? With the avenging warrior like taking the life of the guy who is the cause of his grief, and he has caused such mayhem along the way. Why wouldn't he? But then he just kind of like walks away because he just kind of feels bad. It is a sort of like sleight of hand, but I'm like, oh no, it makes sense because of the story that you've actually built here and the movie that you've actually created, and like this actually justified, like it's satisfying to that story. So I like the way that he sort of plays with expectation in that way and is unafraid to be bold. But there are certainly like gimmicky directors who like don't earn that, and I do feel cheated, right, when they sort of try to be too clever by half. The thing about Soderbergh is that he like is really smart, and so it's hard for him to be too clever by half because he's like actually that clever, right?
Yeah, he's done his homework, unlike a lot of other directors who
Yeah.
kind of aspire to what he does.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is like weirdly up there among my favorite Soderberghs, I think. Yeah, the other thing is like I haven't really seen a lot. Like I think the most recent one that I've seen is like Haywire.
Oh, really?
Well, I had my first kid in 2013, so like spending time watching Soderbergh movies is like not. I have 3 daughters now, and like if it's not animated, I have a hard time seeing it these days. So I definitely like there's this whole like period from like the late 90s to sort of mid 2000s of Soderbergh that I really feel like is my kind of Soderbergh canon. But yeah, I need to start watching some of the new ones, and I definitely do want to see Black Bag.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But like, yeah, he never really has a stinker. Like he just never makes like a half-ass.
I don't know. As Devin, as the Letterboxd expert, do you feel like he has stinkers?
I'd say there's only one film of his that I don't like, and that's Ocean's 13. Because
is it bad?
to me,
or is it just like?
That's the thing. It's not bad.
Right.
I just don't like it.
Right. This is what I mean.
Because it's such a retreat into safetyhood. Is that a word? Safety?
Sure. That could be a word.
Sure.
Retreat into safety. It's a perfectly cromulent word. But
yeah.
So yes, exactly. So my answer to like what's my kind of period of Soderbergh I feel closest to, it's probably the early 2010s, which his red camera period.
Yeah.
And I think to me that came for a very like a person, like it meant a lot to me personally in a very nerdy way, because I went to film school between 2008 and 2013, and right when Soderbergh was getting into red cameras, which were the first affordable cinema camera that had a Super 35 cents censor, shallowed at the field, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short is that he was kind of showing the way for us. I was an aspiring cinematographer in the early 2010s in film school, and seeing Haywire, seeing Contagion, seeing Side Effects, and going, holy shit, you can do that. We can do that now with the camera that like we're renting for cheap rates because we're students. Having that like was the moment that I realized I never wanted to shoot on film again. I love digital, and Soderbergh helped me see that. So I'm forever in his debt for like Haywire and the weird ugliness of that movie and the skin tones that look like absolute shit. Can I swear here? They look bad.
Yes.
They're shitty skin tones, but they're beautiful. And I love that. And so he opened me up to ugliness in a way that very few filmmakers outside of the country of Poland have done.
Do you feel like there's ugliness in the Limey, or does it just come in the later period?
It's ugly. Like I'd say absolutely, like the things that he and Lachman do with like blown out backgrounds, like that warehouse scene where he comes in and threatens the guy with like the Rolodex.
Yeah.
That was apparently, according to the commentary, shot only with available light. And he just told Ed Lachman, the cinematographer, who is one of the living greats, blow out the windows in the back, and Lachman, to his immense credit, did so. But it's a tremendously ugly scene as a result, at least as far as my cinematographer brain goes, because it doesn't look right. The foreground is dark and the key light is not where you would expect it, but in that ugliness comes a counterintuitive beauty, because it's so unified within itself. It's like seeing like one of Turner's most most like provocative paintings, where he just denies you the form you think you want out of that seaside image. It's very but I also think that the digitalness of his later films, once he started doing that, and especially once he started shooting his own films, or I should say Peter Andrews started shooting his films, that's when I think he really hit, to me, his kind of his almost like final form.
Yeah.
As like a counterintuitive aesthete. So there is like a thing where I watch Haywire and go like, those clipped highlights are poetry. I don't quite get here, but he's still on the road here. This feels like a big stepping stone for him.
Yeah, this is also like of the high saturation sort of like yellow lit era of Soderbergh. Like there definitely is a common aesthetic between like Out of Sight, this, Erin Brokovich, Traffic, that I think once he makes that transition to digital, right, the aesthetic does change considerably. I also, it's interesting that you bring up the digital thing, and that you, as a filmmaker yourself, like talk about your love of digital. I when this came out in 99, I was in college, in a college known very much for its like film school, specifically for like independent production film school. And, the news had been that 2 scenes in The Phantom Menace were shot on digital, and that George Lucas was talking about everybody moving away from film to digital, and that this was blasphemy, and that this was going to end cinema forever, and that this was never going to be, there's never going to be a time when digital is going to be considered as good as film is, and it will ruin everything. And like, here we are living in the future. And you have a film nerd in Devan saying like, no, this is not the case. So, sometimes people just get it wrong, and George Lucas gets it right. So there you go. But interesting tie-in to 1999, a time when people were very much freaking out about Y2K and digital film. So
yeah, but he originally wanted to shoot Phantom Menace digitally, didn't he? And then he was prevented because the cameras basically weren't ready. And then they were ready by the time he got to Attack.
Right. So he made 2.
Which,
he wrote 2 scenes and very expensive digital cameras. That's it.
That's great.
But no, that's exactly right. Yeah. Julia, real quick. So I mentioned Payback earlier, and there's 2 films that we've watched in the last few months that like I couldn't stop thinking, like I kept sort of coming to mind as I'm watching this, and one is Payback and the other is Twilight, right? And that there's elements of like, while watching this, I was like, this is the movie Payback wanted to be. And also like, this is the movie that Twilight wanted to be, in some way, right? And like, it has, those movies all have that same theme of like the neo-noir where there is an implied backstory that you never get, but like you're getting sort of the climax of this like unseen backstory where, you know, it's all sort of playing out. This is obviously far more successful than those films are, but as a sort of among the many things it's kind of commentarying on or sort of, you know, paying homage to, how do you think it works as a neo-noir, especially in like contrast to something like Payback?
I mean, I think like for me, and like maybe Devin, I'm wrong, but like the kind of like nouvelle vague type of, if that's what you want to call the editing stuff, that like that kind of makes it its own thing for me, and it makes it kind of uh special as a neo noir, and to the extent that we know the backstories of our like bum heroes in neo noirs, like we don't really know them to this and in this like poetic extent that we do from having the poor cow footage and really showing a very, you know, very young and very tender side to this character, but also in this weird, very distanced way. And so I think it's like, because it's attempting so much more, it feels more accomplished, and to me also feels more uh dramatically powerful. um I don't know how you all feel about the screenplay, but I think a lot of the neo-noir also comes from the screenplay in ways that I often found quite beautiful and interesting. I don't know how you all feel about it.
I want to get to that because I know that Devin has thoughts about Lemdom's thoughts about the screenplay versus the movie, and I want to ask him what he knows that I apparently don't know. What I'm excited about. Have you seen Payback, Devin?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's there's two versions of it. They're both pretty interesting. Neither one of them entirely successful, but there's a theatrical cut and director's cut that is very different. But it's,
Well, I think as a cinematographer, you would be horrified about what happened.
you would, but also like intrigued by what happened. But anyway, those of you who have seen Payback and this probably sort of understand where we're going with that. But yeah, listen, the screenplay is sometimes weird for me because I did get the sense that the movie that Dobbs had written and the movie that Soderbergh had made are not quite the same thing. And where that was kind of most jarring to me is when he goes to the warehouse for the first time and sort of the muscle of the warehouse and the way that they kind of talk, which does not really seem to like fit into the world of kind of semi-real late 90s Los Angeles that the rest of the movie fits into, and that they are kind of talking like, you know, sort of film noir hired guns or whatever, like, you know, get out of here and, you know, whatever, and sort of throwing out these weird epithets that just seem sort of out of time and place. And I was kind of wondering, because like it does seem there is a disconnect between this sort of like core, you know, neo-noir sort of movie versus this like meditation on grief that Soderbergh kind of turns it into. So yeah, what is the beef between Soderbergh and Dobbs, and why did they work together if they didn't see eye to eye on this? Like, I mean, after this, they worked together again, right?
Well, most of what we know about their contentious working relationship around this movie is because they recorded a commentary together, a very infamous commentary. I think it was Scott Tobias wrote a very good article about it in the New Cult Canon. And so the commentaries is the two of them essentially alternating between kind of being a little chummy and arguing vociferously about the merits of the film. Dobbs calls Soderbergh a fetishistic filmmaker in the sense that he cares more about like whether an action scene makes geographical sense than about character backstory. Because Dobbs has been working on the screenplay since he was like 19, apparently.
Oh, wow.
It was very close to him. And then Soderbergh comes in and takes it and totally rearranges it. The flashback structure and like the interesting structure is mostly Soderbergh. Strips out most of the backstory, like especially the Peter Fonda's character has a ton of backstory, but like, you know, he was a big record producer in the 60s and he's pushed away his family and he has an ex-wife who was filmed and then cut from the film. Like there's a big even backstory about why he goes to Big Sur specifically, and that was all cut. And in lieu of basically being a single character piece, a more expressive character piece, expressionistic character piece about the Stamp character. And so if you ever want to like listen to it's one of the two great commentaries where there's actual acrimony. The other one being Hampton Fancher and David Peoples' commentary for Blade Runner.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which is one of my favorites. I don't think the Dobbs Soderbergh commentary. Oh, I should also mention they also recut it in the style of the film, so the commentary is nonlinear.
Oh Jesus Christ! Okay.
Yeah, so the rabbit hole goes deep on this one, my friends, and clearly they patched up eventually, but Dobbs at times seems extremely preoccupied with two things. One is that Soderbergh has kind of killed his baby, and two, it's that despite that, a lot of the gestures that Dobbs put into the screenplay, he is very pissed that he says like, that motherfucker from Variety magazine gave you credit for my idea. So that type of thing too. And yet they seem to be on good terms. They worked on Haywire together, which seemed to have been a less contentious experience. So it's tough to know how much is like a bit and how much is like they're actually like in a knife fight.
Interesting.
It's a great commentary. I recommend it. 10 out of 10. One of the greats.
I mean, it sounds like a little uncomfortable, but also,
it's fun. It doesn't have those like uncomfortable pauses. It feels like the two are like they're just having fun, like going at each other full bore. It's much more fun than it sounds.
When was that recorded? Do you know? Is it like around the time of the movie's release, or is it like the original DVD commentary, or was it like a Criterion?
I used to know it, but I first listened to it in 2004, and they talk about the film largely in the present tense. So I think that like whenever they bring up an actor, they go, "Oh, this is one of they mentioned the actress whose name I forget, who resembles the other actress." They bring her up in like
Denise Richards at Home. Yeah.
They bring her up in a manner that makes me go, okay, this was recorded like a year after it came out.
I gotcha. Okay.
A lot of the lines really like got their hooks into me. Actually, it's kind of like they're kind of all over the place. But you talked about using the word vibe, and that's like at Hara, Denise Richards at Home, and she says to Valentine, "You're not specific enough to be a person. You're more like a vibe."
Yeah.
Which is like an incredible line, and like also I think very true of that character.
Yeah.
So you have these like really like comic moments and these more kind of like poetic or more kind of like straight shot noir type dialogue. But there's this moment where I forget what Barry Newman's character's name, but he goes to Stacy for the first time and he goes like, "Do you want to kill somebody for me?" And he's like, "Sure."
Yeah. That performance, by the way, by Nicky Katt, who, he just took his own life earlier this month, which sucks. But was a really great bit player, character actor. Like he's that character. You get who he is like immediately in that, and that pool playing scene is just like so fucking great and like so tense and weird, and everything about him is just sort of like delightful, and that character too really sort of like is kind of the soul of the movie, in that he is both like funny and like kind of terrifying at the same time, and like they don't really feel to be a contradiction, right? Like that's like Devin, it's funny because you said the term comic relief, and I was like, yeah, that's really not how it feels to me though, because like all of the comedy just feels like it fits, and it shouldn't, and it's like so, because it's a weird movie, but like the weirdness is so kind of woven into it in this like really artful way that none of the comedy ever feels out of place to me. It always feels like, even like the shootout scene, I just found very funny because I'm like, oh, I get it. Like they're all just, it's a comedy. It's like a Shakespearean comedy of errors, and he doesn't have to do any of the work. They all just show up and kill each other, and then all he's going to do is go after Peter Fonda. And I found it both sort of like shocking in its violence, but then also just sort of like a really almost Shakespearean comedy. It's just great.
It's a really fun scene.
It just all works.
Because that scene's interesting because you see very little of Stamp in it, right? And And yet Atara, whenever the scene kind of shifts to her perspective, it's pretty scary because she doesn't know what's going on, and she's just in a shootout as an innocent bystander, and it's terrifying. But then you move to like to Barry Newman's character's perspective, and he's just this like middle manager. We're like, we lost another guy. Come on, guy. He's quite annoyed that this is a situation that he's been stuck in.
Yeah,
which is very funny. His whole character I love. He's one of my favorite performances in the film, and just that kind of vibe he gets of I think it was Soderbergh who in the commentary said he's kind of like a spin on an ex-wife who's on good terms with the Peter Fonda character still. And just sticks around. That's the vibe I get from Jim Avery, played by Barry Newman, where he just I don't really understand why he's still around, but he seems there just out of a loyalty, or he's being paid well.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful, almost like I don't know. I actually got another 1999 film. He reminded me a bit of Sidney Pollack in Eyes Wide Shut, in the sense that they look a bit similar. But,
I thought it was Sidney Pollack for a minute.
For a minute, I did too. But they both have this like exhausted, like, I guess I'm in this movie. I guess I'm in this plot. I have to deal with this garbage, within the film, not the actors. But it's a lovely little kind of leavening to any kind of tension.
Yeah, like even when he dies, there's something. It's like not satisfying, but like it just feels like the right death. Like he doesn't. Like there's that moment where Terrence Stamp could have just like shot him as he's like barely left alive, but he doesn't. Just watches the gun fall out of his hand, and you're like, that seems just. That seems right for that character. Yeah, Barry Newman is sort of like Sidney Pollack and like James Caan had a baby, right? That's kind of where he fits, sort of vibe wise. Yeah. Anyway, this is great. It's a really interesting moment in the Soderbergh canon, and if you haven't seen it, or you have seen it like me and forgot pretty much all about it, it's worth revisiting, and it's free on Pluto with only like 3 ad breaks in pretty good quality, so can't beat that. Julia, did you have any other notes about this that you want to get to?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the nostalgia and kind of anti-nostalgia for the 60s as a theme and like thread running through this movie, and then maybe also in Soderbergh's work as well, because you have Peter Fonda, you have him talking about the 60s, and then you have the Ken Loach kitchen sink drama and that aspect of the 60s, and I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
That's an angle I'd never really considered for this film, so I'm not sure I have a ton of smart stuff to say about that, because but I'll try. So I'll try and come up with something, and then you cut this if it's bad.
Yeah.
But no, I think Soderbergh in general, he always struck me as kind of a true modernist who is very willing on just about every level, whether it be plot or filmmaking technique, to take what he can from the past. Like, this film takes so much inspiration from French New Wave, and also from various movies of the 60s. Like the 2 biggest influences on this film, it should be mentioned, are Point Blank and Get Carter. Those were the 2, and they mention them constantly. And you can see, especially Point Blank with this nonlinear structure. But I'd never really considered the film as responding to the Terrence Stamp character's nostalgia. So you know what? I'm going to sit on that one and say I got little to say about that particular angle that I think wouldn't embarrass myself.
No, I think like, so the sort of 60s part of it, like obviously I think, Soderbergh has a kind of fascination with the 60s and with just kind of like nostalgia in general. You think of like the way that Ocean's 11, the whole Ocean's franchise, right, obviously is sort of, adapted from a much worse Rat Pack movie. By the way, the other thing about Ocean's 11 is that like it's one of the few movies that is like definitively better than the original in every meaningful way. But I also feel that like, there's this movie kind of is themed around nostalgia and or kind of a idealization of the past, and a sense of, sorrow for its for the fact that it's gone. Like the fact that Peter Fonda keeps like just, replacing his young girlfriend with a new young girlfriend and like, trying to sort of hang on to his youth and all that sort of thing. I think that like in the 90s, the 60s were sort of the point of like they were the sort of, that was what nostalgia was like very rooted in the 60s. Like in the mid 1990s, you had the sort of the neo hippie sort of vibe of like teenagers listening to the Grateful Dead and wearing bell bottoms again and like that sort of thing. So I do think that there's like that's just sort of what the shorthand was for nostalgia in the 1990s, and in the way that like in the 2010s, like the 1980s were what became sort of the flashpoint for when we think of like nostalgia of a time gone by. So yeah, I mean, I think like the whole sort of idea of this guy being a 1960s record producer, the sort of like Beach Boys elements of like his life and his lifestyle, and then also the fact that like Terrence Stamp again is like almost playing a character from a 1960s British crime movie, right? Like in a 1990s American crime movie. Is just all part of kind of the contrivance to sort of reflect on this idea of people being nostalgic or like having unresolved issues that they are finally deciding to come to terms with. So I think like as the way that Soderbergh is kind of turning this into an emotional journey, it makes a lot of sense, and it works really well, right? And again, like as Devan said, it also borrows very heavily from New Wave and like Borman and that sort of thing too.
I have some thoughts too, or some things I just noticed maybe. Because like there's this moment when Adhara, who's the younger girlfriend who has no memory of this, she asks if the 60s was like a golden moment.
Yeah.
and he said, well, it was really just 66 and early 67.
Yeah, I love that line. It's so good.
His character's named Terry. And Terry Melcher was the music producer who was involved in the Manson family and was like potentially a target of the Manson family that they missed. And then you have like the kitchen sink realism of the 60s and just this like, totally against the kind of like Carnaby Street glamour of 60s, swinging 60s Britain. And it's kind of like, I don't know, there's this mix of like wanting to be nostalgic for it and then realizing like it was just kind of awful.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I have a overarching thesis about that, but I found it really interesting.
It's interesting to consider the film's relationship with realism, because one thing that Soderbergh is really into, not just here, but throughout the rest of his career, although this feels like something of an inflection point for that, is relying on a lot of gestures and also production techniques that we would conventionally associate with heightening of realism, right? He gets out of his actor's ways. He shoots multi-camera a lot so that performances can kind of live more naturally in the moment, not play to a camera, and so he can cut around them. He uses available light a lot, and he also shoots handheld.
Yeah.
And all of those things kind of imply a sort of realism, but he also runs in the exact opposite direction in all the aforementioned things structurally and with the performances that we would associate. So I feel like his relationship with what we might associate with naturalism, realism, however we want to talk about it, is very unusual.
Yeah.
The other funniest moment in the film for me that I completely whiffed on mentioning, and I got to mention, is when Terrence Stamp is spying on We Have Denise Richards at Home, and he chooses to peek out from like the wall behind her in a way that almost identically resembles the you always know a Milford man from Arrested Development. And every time I watch the film, I forget about it and put those together again, and it is just the funniest. I don't know if it's supposed to be funny or if it's just funny because 4 years later Arrested Development did it in the funniest way imaginable, but I laugh very hard every time I see that moment. So that's the other moment I just love for the humor of it.
I did not put that together, but yeah, I I know the moment you're talking about, and I also it's I think it is deliberately quite funny because he's actually quite bad about being like stealth, as it turns out. Like he's not very suave. Like he's pretty he's pretty kind of bumbling. And that's
they say Terrence Stamp should neither be seen nor heard.
Well, there is that line right where Peter Fonda's character asks Newman's character, he's like, well, how are you going to find him? And he's like, he's not James Bond.
Oh man, yeah, you could like literally just put together all the you could put a list of the great lines, the funny lines in this movie, and it would seem like to anybody who saw it out of context that it's like a straightforward comedy, but it definitely is not. But it is pretty goddamn funny. And Louis Guzman, like I love that he shows up to that party in like a Che Guevara t-shirt, and
I always, especially now, given that Soderbergh has made the
Che Guevara movie,
most prominent, he made the Che movies.
It feels like I think someone should do like it feels like that like when you put the George Clooney part like against Out of Sight and then Che Guevara later on, I feel like someone could do an internet thing where they take all of Soderbergh's movies and do the Pixar thing where they find out like how it's all a shared universe and like how like there's an element of there's some hint to some future movie in some existing movie. I would not be surprised if that's like a completely doable thing and that there's kind of some self-reference to Soderbergh either before or after the fact in like every single one of his movies. But
it's only on this latest kind of binge I've been on. I think I've watched like 8 Soderbergh films in the past month, just naturally before Julia even approached me about this. It struck me this time just how consistent a thread in his career is that kind of what's the best way to put this? Like capitalism, skepticism, kind of pseudo leftism. I'm not sure what his political beliefs are, but between like Haywire is a financial crisis movie.
Yeah.
Magic Mike is a financial crisis movie. I mean, a lot of his films are exactly. And a lot of, and even Erin Brokovich is not a financial crisis movie, but it's about, late capitalism destroying lives.
As is Traffic, right? I mean, in a similar way. Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting how I never really clocked just how consistent that was. It wasn't a one-off. So now Che seems to me, it's like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Even though it still feels like a movie he didn't make. It feels outside his filmography in some ways.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, there's something very strange about Soderbergh in that he is like, when you look at the actual canon, it's very political. And yet, like, I really couldn't tell you what his politics are. Like, my guess is that he's, like, pretty left of center, but, like, I don't really know that. I just sort of, it just sort of is based on the sort of impression I get from the sum total of the subjects of his movies. But it's not like Oliver Stone where I could be like, well, I can tell you what his politics, like, I will sit you down and tell you a long story about that. But he's more elusive. And I think that that's part of what makes him so interesting too, is like, he's a weirdly non-public figure, right? Like I've seen a couple interviews with him maybe, but like he is not like, he's not like elusive in that sort of like Stanley Kubrick way, but he's not famous. It's weird. It's a very strange little like place he's found for himself as a very famous person.
Yeah, and I mean, he has an unusual amount of work out there in terms of his blog. Like he's done dozens of DVD commentaries, right? Like you can listen to him talk for hours and hours if you want.
Yeah.
But it's never about himself. It's always about even in his own commentaries are cagey about his own his own life. He's very, very focused on the work. I mean, I guess it makes sense because I don't know how, like, we haven't really talked about how prolific this man is. I don't know how he does it. The fact that he at any given point is probably developing 4 movies and a television series. It's absolutely wild that anything comes out good.
It is. That is the thing, right? It's the prolific to quality ratio that is just astonishing from this guy.
We got him and Hong Sang-soo, and that's it in terms of that.
Yeah. All right, so we should get to the end here. So we have 2 final questions that we ask all of our guests before we go, and the first question is, aside from the Limey, what is your favorite movie of 1999?
I have three that I kind of have at the top tier of them. I'd say Eyes Wide Shut, obvious pick.
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, it's like it's not even like my top three Kubrick, but it's, Jesus Christ, it's great. Beau Travail, Claire Denis.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And The Insider, Michael Mann. Those are my three that I just think are unimpeachable from this year. I find it interesting. I maybe I'm pre-answering a second question or something, but I find it very difficult to like the idea of like even arranging years in terms of like going, this was a strong year. Seems it's very difficult for me.
Yeah.
Aside from like 1929, bad year. 1932, really good year. 1927, really good year. But that's about it. That's about as far as I'll go. Do you ever want to watch a lot of movies with people standing around potted plants? 1929 is a great year for you.
Okay, great. Good to know. So maybe that's the next podcast when we wrap this one up. We go back 70 years to the original 1999, 1929. So Eyes Wide Shut, I like over time, increasingly, it is my favorite Kubrick film. Like at the time, it was sort of, I don't know, it sort of felt like imposter syndrome. Like not a lot of people loved it when it came out, and they were like, it's not Clockwork Orange, it's not, 2001, whatever. And like, yeah, it is. It's really great, and it has aged really well over time. Like it's more as it's sort of settled in to become part of his real canon. Like it is a remarkable fucking movie. And yeah, we have not done Beau Travail. I know it's a favorite of a lot of people as well. Looking forward to eventually doing that one. And we are close to doing The Insider. It just is. It's been sort of on our like 2 or 3 movies away list for a long time, but that is also a favorite of Julia and mine as well. What is what is the movie that you cite as your favorite movie of all time when cornered at a party and have to give an answer?
So so Letterboxd is annoying because they only let you pick 4.
Yeah.
And I cycle through 5. So I got five that I cannot rank relative to each other. So I apologize immensely.
That's fine.
I'll go in chronological order.
Okay.
Abel Gance's Napoleon, 1927.
Okay.
Ernst Lubitsch's To Be or Not to Be, 1942. I think the greatest American comedy ever made.
Oh, so good. So good. Yeah.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Sergio Leone. The international 1967 English language cut, the 161-minute one, except no substitutes. The Quiet Man, 1952,
okay.
A little out of order.
Yeah.
My favorite romantic comedy ever, maybe, and that's saying Ernst Lubitsch is my favorite director ever, and he's the greatest romantic comedy director ever. John Ford, unfortunately, made in my opinion, I think the greatest romantic comedy ever, even though it's a very dark movie about toxic masculinity. It's a tough one, but I love it. And McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Robert Altman, 1971. Those would be my picks. It's hard to pick though. I mean, I'm someone of enthusiasms. Ask me tomorrow and it might be the Bulgarian animated film The Treasure Planet. So who knows? Ask me next week and it might all be different.
I love it. Someone of enthusiasm.
I think I borrowed that line. I realized I use it a lot, and I realized I've been unwittingly borrowing it from Robert De Niro's Al Capone, where he goes enthusiasms.
Enthusiasms.
Yeah.
Even picking a favorite Robert Altman is hard. Like that's so.
Yeah, and I just rewatched Nashville, and it's as good as McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Well, who am I to even preference one? They're amazing.
I love Shortcuts, also because I'm a big Raymond Carver fan, anyways. But yeah, and To Be or Not to Be, like that's a movie I gotta watch again. I saw that movie when I was like 12, and I understood it. You know what I mean? Like. That's how good it is like 12-year-old me was like, this movie's great. And I just don't think that that's the sort of movie that like you typically would think 12-year-olds would find great. But that is it's fucking phenomenal movie. Good list. That's a good list. I don't at all disparage you for copping out and picking 5. I think that's perfectly fine.
I feel like asking anyone to name less than 25 is just ridiculous.
It is. But like we have that would be a different podcast. Like your 25 favorite movies would be its own podcast, and we could not just tag it on at the end of episodes. All right, guys, this has been fun. And what a treat to revisit this movie and like think about Soderbergh again for the first time in a while, and I got to go watch Black Bag at some point in the next couple days.
Actually, I have a question for you two.
Yeah,
a question for you two. What's your favorite Soderbergh? I feel we haven't broached that yet for you two.
The top.
You go first, John, because I need a minute.
I mean, so I think like this isn't. So if I'm going to just do like a ball of like the top like 4 or 5, right? So I think this is in that ball of top like 4 or 5. King of the Hill, I think.
Interesting. One of his unloved early 90s works.
Yeah, I think it might be the first one I saw. Because I think I actually saw it in the theater when it came out, and I just really loved it. And I've had a sort of sentimental relationship with it since. And it is just like an objectively great movie. Like if people haven't seen it, it's really quite wonderful. I have to say, like I just purely out of like how great it was as entertainment, like just based on like the first time experience, I agree that Ocean's 12 like might be a better movie, but like Ocean's 11 is the one I like more. And again,
I have the opposite thing of those. I think Ocean's 11 is probably a better movie, but I love Ocean's 12 more.
Okay, fine, fair enough. Like either way, but like it is definitely like I love both of them, but that's definitely the one that I like have a more sentimental relationship with. Out of Sight for sure. And I think Sex, Lies, and Videotape is great, but like I don't have as much of like a emotional relationship to it. I just think like Haywire is like a perfect action movie. And so I think that's my top 5. Honorable mention to Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which is like objectively a great movie, but I just don't feel as like personal.
Okay, so I'm allowed 5.
You're allowed 5.
Does Beyond the Candelabra count? Because think that's
of
really
course,
phenomenal.
the rules.
Beyond the Candelabra, Out of Sight, Ocean's 12, Side Effects.
Interesting.
And now I can't decide if it's going to be Logan, Lucky, or Black Bag.
Oh, okay.
I'm like I'm just completely entranced by Black Bag right now. I can't. I gotta watch it again. I gotta figure out my enchantment with it.
It's like you have two suitors, and both of them are equal in character, but you must
Channing Tatum and Cate Blanchett. It's a toughie.
Choose between Demetrius and Lysander. So. Oh, one more thing, and I'd be really remiss by not saying this. Lem Dobbs also, we should say, like wrote some great movies. Dark City, amazing. I love the score. I'm a big fan of that movie. The movie Lee that just came out a couple years ago with Kate Winslet, but also holds the distinguished title of having written what is universally considered one of the worst movies of all time. And that is the John Travolta Gotti movie.
I tried to watch it ironically and got through 2 minutes.
You can't even do that. It's like that's
we did the exact. It was like the only, because I do a lot of bad movie nights with friends. It was one of the only movies we ducked out of.
You can't. It's unwatchable. Literally unwatchable.
It's not fun bad. And that's a very low bar. Like you're talking to like one of the world's only Dinesh D'Souza completionists over here. Like I made it through all his films, and somehow I couldn't make it through Gotti. that's how little I got out of Gotti. I do not condone Dinesh D'Souza. I have a list on Letterboxd called our worst living director. So
that is incredible framing of how bad Gotti is. So I will leave you with the last word on that. Yeah, it is not watchable. Literally. So they can't all be winners, guys. Sometimes you're going to write great movies, and sometimes you're going to write one of the worst of all time. Devan, if people want to connect with you, find you on social media, wherever you hang out on the internet, and troll as you've been doing since the age of 11, as you say, where can they do that?
Probably the two best spots are my Letterboxd, which is Devan, spelled the weird Irish way, Devan AG Scott. Letterboxd, where I post, I try and review every single thing I watch, or not review, I diary entry it, which can be everything from 1 word to like 3,000 words sometimes. But I also have my website, which is called movingimageagency.com, which is my post-production house, but I also have my podcast on there, links to all my video essays. I run a Discord server that is, I deliberately bury I buried the link on the website, so it's not that easy to find. But if you made it this far in the podcast, you passed the test. It's underneath the podcast part. But yeah, you can find all my stuff there. It's kind of the hub for finding everything I do.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to watch this movie again, and everybody go watch the Limey. It's really good, and you can watch it for free. So we will see you again next time, and until then, look out for props, everybody.
I looked under chairs, I looked under tables, I tried to find the key to 50 million fables. They call me the seeker.